You already know what time it is. Welcome back into the What Off-Season Sports Podcast, everybody. Coming on the show today, we have a great discussion on why coaching really surpasses talent in the NFL. You know, talent isn't everything. You got to have the brains to make it happen. And then we take a look at some surprises that were really shown to everyone in the NBA bubble, which was a genius idea, by the way, by the NBA. I super commend Adam Silver with doing a great job with the bubble concept. And then if you stay tuned for the whole episode today, we have an amazing QB1 breakdown, a debate to round out the show. Of course, never forget, guys, we're on Apple Podcasts, YouTube, Spotify, wherever you get your podcast at. Be sure to check out the link in our social media bios for the link tree. Everything What Off Season is right there for you guys. Joining me on today's episode, guys, we got this guest list rolling and I'm loving it. Brian Bolster of Bolstered Up Sports, a fellow sports podcaster and content creator. Brian, thanks for agreeing to come on the show today, man. Tell me and the fans a little bit about yourself.
Hey, first off, I just want to go ahead and thank you for having me on.
Of course.
Yeah, definitely. I've been digging all your videos, so it's cool to actually get on one of them with you. Now, a little bit about me. I'm a high school football coach and teacher, and I'm now in Raleigh, North Carolina. I started up my podcast in April. I've really been enjoying it, and now I'm actually writing for The Ryan Show as well, breaking down.
Congratulations on that,
Titans.
by the way, man. That's awesome.
Thank you very much. So, yeah, I'm repping the Titans right now.
Hey, there we
I've
go.
got that, and I'm actually, my next video coming out, an article will be detailing their recent draft selection, Darrington Evans, third-round running back out of App State. So I'm repping my App State, too. I'm an App State alum. So I'm really looking forward to a lot of that, and I appreciate you having me on.
Yeah, man. Absolutely. Thank you so much for coming on today. We got so much to dig into. Let's go ahead and get right into it, though. The first topic today on the What Off Season Sports Podcast, everybody, is why coaching surpasses talent in the NFL. And before I really dig all the way into it, Brian, I want to ask you, when you hear that statement, does that stand out to you? Do you think coaching actually does surpass talent in the NFL? I want to get your thoughts on that.
I do think coaching is a major factor, specifically in football in general.
Right.
Through from high school, college, and in the NFL. Obvious examples in college is Nick Saban, Dabo Swinney. You put those guys anywhere, they're going to win. Urban Meyer, he's shown that, where he can go from college to college and still win. I do think as a coach, I think any good coach would tell you that players win the games.
They do.
But the truth is, right, they make the plays, they win the games. But the truth is the coaching helps prepare those players and put them in the right positions to be successful. So quality coaching can stretch that talent a little bit further.
I agree. And kind of going hand with what Brian just said, everybody, if you look really just in the general sports community, but you can have loads of talent and still fall short at the end of the season. We see it every year with loaded rosters in any sport, such high expectations, championship bound, supposed to win, maybe an undefeated season, you know, whatever all these people are saying about it, but they fall short because the coaching isn't where it is supposed to be. And at the end of the day, it's all about leadership. It's all about the foundation of that squad, of that formation, and really what that program is and what their strengths and weaknesses are. And to bring that to the top and really evaluate that, you have to have elite coaching. I would say good coaching, yes, but elite coaching is what's going to get your franchise, you know, your team, your squad to that next level to push for a title. And I got a couple examples of some teams here where really you have loaded rosters but bad coaching, which means they fall short, or you don't have a loaded roster but you have loaded coaching perhaps, and these teams are propelling upwards. But before I get into these teams, Brian, I want to ask you.
First of all, I think you hit the nail on the head with leadership. And I think that is the separating factor for elite coaches and why they have so much impact on winning and a team is they set the foundation for the team culture. They are the model that everybody looks to. More recent example is Mike Tomlin with the Steelers. Obviously, Big Ben goes down and they're throwing in Duck and Mason Rudolph at quarterback. And I know they had their struggles, but basically once they got their feet under them, they were a totally different team. And I think you can attribute a lot of that to Mike Tomlin.
Of course. 100%. I agree with you on that. And I saw you hit the nail on the head, like you mentioned, with the Patriots and also the Steelers. I'm going to get you a little bit on the flip side there. And let's take a look at a team that was pretty loaded, top 5 in the roster category, for the talents of the NFL, but they just couldn't get over the hump. And it's going to be the Dallas Cowboys, top 5 roster in the league for some time now. And we've seen what the Cowboys have went through between the fans, between the whole Jason Garrett era, between Dak Prescott being good, great. Then it seems like he's bad some days. But when you just look at, let's take a look at Dak's rookie year when the Cowboys were 13-3. They were such a hot team in the league, but then they lost to a 10-6 Packers team who then got destroyed by Atlanta. That was the year Atlanta went to the Super Bowl. They hung 44 on the Packers in that NFC Championship game. And when you just go and you take a look back at really since Dallas has broke through, and they've even had talent before the CeeDee Lamb, Amari Cooper, Dak, and Zeke days. It was Tony Romo and DeMarco Murray and Des Bryant, and you had Miles Austin, and Jason Witten. You had, still elite talent for the Cowboys at that time. But, Jason Garrett's coaching was some of the worst during his time with them. And you can just see when they had 3 straight 8-8 seasons and they came out of the rut a little bit, but the Cowboys were never consistent. They haven't really been consistent, honestly, in the past decade in terms of pushing through the playoffs or just having consistent winning seasons. And I can definitely attribute that to Jason Garrett. And you look at the roster for the Cowboys, like I said, still one of the most talented teams in the NFL. They couldn't and they still can't get over the hump. And I think Jason Garrett was a big contributing factor to that. Now they've got, of course, Mike McCarthy in there. Not necessarily a huge running coach, but with the likes of Zeke, he's going to have to put that ball on the ground. The opportunity to have 3 possible 1,000-yard receivers this year for the Cowboys. They're top 5 in the league in roster talent again, maybe even top 3. I mean, they're loaded when you look at their roster. And you even look at the defensive side. But I want to ask you, Brian, do you feel like the Cowboys are a good example there of where teams, have a lot of talent but just can't get over the hump?
Completely. I think, and you bring up a good point with getting to the playoffs or when they play quality competition, Jason Garrett's decision-making.
Awful.
And I wouldn't necessarily say he's like an awful coach, but
right.
He didn't bring that great leadership and culture building, which to your point brought inconsistency. Then when the stakes heightened, his maybe average to below average decision-making got completely exposed and would dip in the playoffs or against great competition. So I think they're a great example of that. And another example that I think is in the same vein is the Chargers. They've been a team for basically most of Phillip Rivers' career that's had a lot of talent. And they just can't quite put it together for whatever reason. I know their coaching has been much maligned over the past couple of years. People have some confidence in Anthony Lynn now. We'll see. But I think the Cowboys are definitely a great example of that.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And then you got another one here. I don't know if people necessarily think of this team, but I also feel like they're at least top 10 in the league in roster talent. You got to take a look at the Cleveland Browns. Yet again, another very talented team when you go roster for roster spot. It feels like they have 2 of everything when it comes to the skill positions and the skill players that are on there. And you really look, the only real hole in the roster right now, true hole, is Baker Mayfield, who will be out. He'll be out of there if he doesn't do something within the next couple of years. Had a great rookie year, fell off the year after that. And you have to attribute that to Freddie Kitchens when you have a top 5 or 6 running back in Nick Chubb, OBJ, Jarvis Landry, a top 5 pass rusher in Myles Garrett, Austin Hooper, David Njoku. I mean, they've got pieces. And yet again, god-awful coaching for what seems like forever, it feels like in Cleveland. And I don't necessarily think it was dumb to believe in Freddie Kitchens, but I feel like it was ignorance in the fact that everybody kind of held him on a high pedestal because he worked alongside a big name in the college football picture, I want to say, for just one season. You even look into the Browns, they have 18 head coaches in their franchise's history. So coming into their second year with plenty of talent on both sides of the ball. So we really got to see if Kevin Stefanski will turn that Cleveland Brown team around. Another great example there. And then when we were going on the flip side also, now we're going to talk about teams with hardly any talent, but obviously they had the coaching to be able to propel them, like you mentioned, Brian, with the Steelers. When you lose your trio in a quarterback, running back, and a wide receiver, Big Ben, Antonio Brown, and then Le'Veon Bell, and you're still able to go 500. Yes, it was only 8-8, but you were even on your third string quarterback. James Conner even missed some time. So you were on third string quarterbacks and on third string running backs at one point in the season, and he was still able to muster an 8-8 year. And you even look even more into Mike Tomlin's career. That's because of just the way he's been able to coach that team. I mean, a 133-74 record in his entire year, winning the Super Bowl in his second year as the head coach, and he's been to 2 of them. And you got to think the way he was just able to deal with Antonio Brown, basically trying to implode that Steelers locker room, all the altercations with Big Ben, just with the team in general. And Mike Tomlin is a great, solid coach who has shown us his consistency year in and year out also for the Steelers. And then you mentioned the Patriots as well, of course. Bill Belichick, don't need to dig too much into this one, but really besides the Randy Moss days, Bill Belichick and Tom Brady have never had elite talent with all the times that they went to the Super Bowl. It's always been on the defensive side of the ball, which obviously Bill Belichick is going to be over there, but they have their D coordinator, for that area of the team. But with just the way Bill Belichick is constantly able to win 12 or more games, appearing in the playoffs, winning Super Bowls, going to Super Bowls, just out coaching and outsmarting and making a lot of teams look silly in the NFL. He makes New England relevant every year in and out due to the impeccable knowledge of the game. Great segment there with you, Brian. I love that there. Why coaching surpasses talent in the NFL. We're now going to segue into the NBA part of the show today, everybody. So before we even get into this, before we're talking about the surprises, everything with the NBA bubble, I want to ask you, dude, what do you make of Damian Lillard in this bubble?
Unreal. I think he's the closest thing to Kobe Bryant that we've seen,
Yeah.
which I know, some people want to compare players only in boxes. And it's
Right.
like, well, Damian Lillard isn't a shooting guard. He doesn't have that SG next to his name, so you can't compare him to Kobe. But I think that's selling the player short. And I think he has that Mamba mentality. If I was going to point at one player in the league, I'm pointing to Damian Lillard. And he's absolutely taken over. He's almost taken what Steph Curry did as far as off the dribble threes and taking it a step further.
Yeah.
They're coming up and setting ball screens for him at 35, even close to 40 feet.
Exactly.
And if his defender, if his defender goes underneath, he pulls up off the dribble from 35 feet and is just draining them. It's amazing to watch. And especially, I loved seeing it after I'm a Lakers fan. So I loved seeing him respond.
That explains all the comments on my Lakers post. Okay, you're high on the Lakers. I see you there.
Yeah, 100%. I can't hide. I'm a little bit of bias. I can't lie about that. But so I loved his response to the Clippers and that fiasco. Like when I don't know if you were watching that game, but when he was going to the line to shoot those 2 free throws, I thought there was a 100% chance he was making both. I was shocked that he missed them. But I thought he had the greatest response to it. Mature, focused, and you could see he always has that fire going. And after that, after Pat Bev yelling Dame time at him, he took it up to just a whole nother level, and it's been awesome to watch.
Yeah, it has been. And, with Patrick Beverley making fun of him on the sidelines and then coming back the next night, 51 points, coming back the next game, 61 points. And what's crazy is he actually got a plethora of free throws, to his disposal after that Clippers game. I want to say he was 33 for 34 from the free throw line. So, super tapped in, super locked in, really resembling that, you were talking about the Lakers, how LeBron's been this year. Everybody was saying washed king, LeBron's done for, it's the Clips season, this and that. They missed the playoffs, but then the Lakers have one hell of an off season and LeBron James is right back in it. And he's just displaying that mentality, listening to the haters, taking the criticism and building from it. So I could definitely relate to you when you're saying, you feel that Mamba mentality between him, and you even see it in LeBron James and even some in Kawhi Leonard also. And you just got to look, like we were just mentioning, Damian Lillard completely erupted in this bubble, winning the unanimous bubble MVP. Don't know if you guys saw the post that I put out, but I did have Dame time as my NBA bubble MVP. There were some close seconds. I know some people were thinking Devin Booker and Giannis Antetokounmpo. Giannis probably would have placed second for me just because of how well he has played in the bubble, but it had to be Dame time, Dame Dollar, Damian Lillard, no question about it. But I think that was easy for everyone. He just absolutely went off in this bubble. Second player in NBA history besides Wilt Chamberlain to have 3 60-point games in a season. So that's a very elite club to join there. And then back-to-back 50-plus point games, now making him 8th all-time in 50-point games. He just passed Kareem for the last spot, tied with Allen Iverson, and he's just one game back of LeBron James, and he leads the NBA in minutes per game this year. Damian Lillard does. So he's out there. He's playing for the Blazers. You can't say he's not shouldering the load for the Blazers. The Lakers look concerning, 100%. They look concerning. And now me learning that you are a Lakers fan here on the show, man, I want you to tell me what concerns you, what has concerned you about the Lakers, whether it's, whether you feel like they've been playing possum or not. You as a fan, what's concerning you with your team right now?
Number one would probably be 3-point shooting.
Mm-hmm.
It's not been good, and I
I want to
think
say less
for
than 25%.
yeah, like it's been bad, and for us to make a deep run in the playoffs, that's going to have to come back.
Right.
And it worries me because let's say Kuzma, Waiters, J.R. Smith are all inconsistent players. Like they might go off and have a great game, hit 6 threes, but they're going to have a game or two where they're going, 1 for 8 from the 3-point line. So that's concerning.
Right.
Then I am a little bit concerned about LeBron. I think.
Me too. I'm really shocked by LeBron's performance in the bubble.
Yeah, I think the Lakers were really hurt by the delayed season. I think they were playing better than anybody right up until it was postponed.
Yeah.
And LeBron, I think at that point against the Bucks, they were on that hot streak, and I think LeBron was kind of solidifying himself as still the number one player in the NBA.
Yeah.
And
luckily
I think
they're not including the bubble in that voting because I think that would really hurt him. I still have LeBron as the MVP, but I think if they included the bubble play, I think that would definitely take it away from him.
Oh, 100%. Yeah, I think if you include that, then he would definitely be a distant second to Giannis.
Right.
And then, but, I've still got faith in him. I think he's been able to flip the switch, turn it back on.
Oh, yeah.
But I still have questions about Anthony Davis, not the talent. Like, he's a great player, but I question his ability and his toughness in the playoffs. Like, we've seen him shrink. We've seen him kind of float through games and disappear. And in games where he really should take over and dominate. So that worries me a little bit that in a matchup, let's say against the Clippers, like LeBron will get his, but it's going to come down to Anthony Davis needing to dominate the Clippers when they just don't have anybody to match up against him.
Yep.
And he just hasn't proven it yet. So I just think that's a big question mark.
Yeah, I feel you on that. And Anthony, I'm glad that you brought that up because I said it in my NBA bubble predictions. And I want to say a social media video that I put out. LeBron's going to get his. LeBron's a veteran. LeBron knows how to adapt and how to adjust and to just really play with what's given to him. But with Anthony Davis, who is a veteran also, and I think AD's an elite scorer. There's no question about the talent, like you said. But sometimes he isn't very consistent. And sometimes the Lakers really depend on him and depend on his scoring to propel them. But when AD shrinks, sometimes the Lakers shrink also. And we've obviously seen, if LeBron shrinks, then the Lakers, they look pretty lost without LeBron out there on the court. And you look into their bubble numbers here, 3-5 in the bubble, losing twice to the Raptors, who are looking like a major favorite to repeat this year. I think they have arguably the best starting five in the NBA when you talk about leadership, consistency, and the veterans that are in that starting five who perform night in and night out. And, they lost once to the Kings as well, but you got to look at those losses. They lost by an average of 14 points in the bubble to every team. There was one loss where they lost by, I want to say they lost by 6 to like the Pacers or whatever it might have been. But, that's a decent margin. That looks like bad losses on the Lakers. And then, yes, they clinched, but that's still downward momentum heading in to the playoffs. And, like I said, the Lakers could be playing possum. They could be fooling everybody. We all know LeBron James is a different freak when he gets into the playoffs. If there's two people I don't bet on in the postseason, it's LeBron James and Tom Brady and Tiger Woods if he's obviously playing, maybe give or take on that. I know you're the golf dude, but it's really, really hard for me to go against LeBron James in the playoffs. I know he's a different freak when, the postseason comes around, but they had the worst field goal percentage in the bubble at 41, literally dead last in the bubble, shooting 41% as a team from the field. And they gave up 136 points to the Kings to close out the season. So it's really concerning, especially on the defensive end. And you got to look at it. At the end of the day, the Lakers are an older team that doesn't play up-tempo basketball with the likes of the other high-flying teams in the league. And you have to make them chase you around the court, and you're going to have to shoot the 3 ball on them in order to be able to beat them. Because if there is one thing the Lakers don't do well, it's defend the perimeter. And with a high-flying, fast-paced shooting at will team like the Portland Trail Blazers, they're definitely going to have their time tested for them in the first round. Before we get into this last part of the NBA bubble review, what did you think about the Pelicans in the bubble?
I was so disappointed, to be honest. They were one of the teams that I was most excited to watch. I'm a
Right.
Zion fan, so I was really hoping that he would play at a high level. And I watched the first game. I sat down and was like, all right, basketball is back. It's the Pelicans versus the Jazz. And the Pelicans looked great coming out of the gates. Zion looked great right away. And then in the fourth quarter, I was just scratching my head the whole time, like, when are they going to put Zion in? And they
Exactly.
just didn't. And I won't say that they tried to lose, but they did not try to win that game.
They had that game in their hands against the Jazz team that was obviously better than them. They outplayed the Jazz for like 90% of that game, I felt like, and then just couldn't close it out of that because that was their game to lose, and they lost by such a slim margin, to open the bubble.
Yeah, that was tough watching that. So honestly, after that, my hopes for them went down quite a bit. Even though they had, I believe, the easiest schedule, they only went 2-6.
Literally.
Yeah, it's tough. And, with Zion being on the minutes restriction, that wasn't a bunch of fun, especially because they weren't even using that strategically, in my opinion. They weren't letting him close halves or close quarters, particularly the fourth quarter. And he looked a bit out of shape, which was a little bit disappointing. Lonzo Ball was awful. Even though he had a great regular season, this bubble regular season, he was really bad. So,
yeah.
I didn't see what I wanted to out of the Pelicans, but I do think they're going to rebound next year and be a playoff team.
Right. I 100% agree with you. I don't know. I don't know if they could rebound and be a playoff team. Maybe they could push for the 8th seed, the 7th seed next year. Maybe up towards the 6th seed, but the East has a lot of talent in there. But I was extremely disappointed, like you just mentioned, with the New Orleans Pelicans. They flopped in the bubble, 100%. There's no question about that. They should have breezed through the bubble to get to the 8th seed. I had them going 6-2 in the NBA bubble. Instead, they completely turned it around and went 2-6. And you got to look, with a young, talented roster and a good chance to get the 8th seed, they absolutely blew their chance to do it. It was their 8th seed to grab, and they let it go. Now it's Portland's, obviously. And like I mentioned, I had them going 6-2 in the bubble, maybe the easiest path, like you mentioned, to get to the playoffs, considering the ugliness that was at the bottom of the Western Conference. Obviously, it fared out a lot better, tonight with the play-in game and everything than it really was foreshadowed to be. But instead, with the Pelicans, Zion was on a pitch count after claiming to be healthy, which I don't know if I even really buy that Zion was healthy at all this season, because he was obviously, delayed tearing the meniscus. So that was really a setback for him. He's got to lose some weight. He's got to get more in shape. But with Zion, having Zion on a pitch count, it's kind of almost like the Todd Gurley situation. Gurley came back, said everything was okay, but then you see him riding the bike in the Super Bowl for damn near the whole game. You see him get 6 or 7 carries in the NFC Championship against New Orleans that year. So it's like, where is this superstar? Where is this guy that came so hot out of the gate? He's saying that he's fine, but he's not performing on the court and on the field. So I don't think Zion was healthy at all. And you got to look, they went 1-3 the first 4 games of the bubble, and then they're eliminated shortly after, finished 2-6, shut down their superstars, and then they fired the head coach, Alvin Gentry. So that escalated very, very quickly. I was super shocked with the Pelicans. Didn't think they were going to necessarily push super far for a deep playoff run. And with them shutting down Zion and limiting his minutes, I can't blame them for limiting his minutes, but you can't lie to the media at the end of the day, because it's going to get people like us, sports podcasters, content creators, and people in the media wondering, they're going to challenge you on that. Is he really healthy? And I don't think Zion was healthy this playoffs. I don't think he was healthy this season. And seeing how, as the Pelicans are probably going to have an early exit anyways, they just really didn't want to risk it, as Zion has a huge, bright future ahead of him.
Today's episode is brought to you by Kangaroo. Kangaroo was created to ensure that everyone has access to home security. Every product Kangaroo makes starts with 3 questions. Is it simple? Can it be produced at a price that everyone can afford? And is it secure? With Kangaroo, you never pay for unnecessary bells and whistles, and your data is going to be secure. The front door security kit is a simple setup with no tools or tech geeks required. If you have Wi-Fi and a smartphone, which I'm sure you do, you can use Kangaroo. Go to heykangaroo.com to learn more and start keeping your home safe today. And be sure to use the code RINGDONG for 20% off any Kangaroo complete subscription order.
But now we're going to spill over into the NCAA football segment here on the What Off-Season Sports Podcast, everybody. Of the Big Ten and the Pac-12. Obviously, we know the decision that they made early on in the week, postponing, canceling, whatever you want to call it, until the spring. I want to ask you, though, before we get into this, Brian, do you feel like that was a good move by the Big Ten and the Pac-12? Do you actually feel like we'll be able to have spring football?
I think trying to predict if we're going to have spring football is impossible, to be
Right.
perfectly honest with you. I
Yeah.
think that they are going to make a major push to make it happen. They can't go without that revenue. So I think we
Right.
will see that. As far as it being the right decision, I would think so. I think it's a
Mhm.
decision that they had to make it. Just the liability involved for the universities and the conferences was just far too great to push forward with the season. Now, on the flip side, obviously, we've got the ACC, Big 12, and SEC still holding on for dear life to fall football.
Oh,
And
yes.
again, I can't predict what they're going to do, but I think no matter what, they're going to push it to the absolute last minute before they make a decision to
Oh, of
postpone if they
course. Of
are. Um,
course.
again, I've said for a long time, I'm kind of backing off a little bit, but that the SEC was going to play football in the fall, like no matter what. I
Right.
think, everybody behind the scenes, all the boosters are really pushing for it. I don't think they want to wait to see their football, to see, the Roll Tide and everything, go Tigers. I don't think that their fans are willing to wait until the spring. It'll be interesting to see what happens, but I do think one of the biggest rippling effects out of this whole situation is the players coming together to unite. I know the biggest version of that was in the Pac 12 asking for as much as 50% of the conference revenue going to players, among
Yep.
a bunch of other things, health coverage through 6 years after they graduate. And that's really what I would like to see. I would definitely think the players need to be taken care of after they graduate. They're coming into a contract basically, and they do receive benefits. But I would like to see them, at a minimum, their health care taken care of after they graduate, because that's a lot of times where you're going to see the physical toll for a player come into effect. Is not when they're 22 years old, but a little bit later down the line.
Right. I agree with you. And another angle I was taking out there, you were talking about the kids being able to play, them getting compensated, them being taken care of. They need to be taken care of up front, like you were mentioning, with their health and their safety, demanding that everything is obviously constructed around, COVID-19 regulations and making sure everything is safe for the players, because these kids are young. A lot of these kids have bright futures ahead of them. They're pushing to the ultimate dream of playing in the NFL or playing professional football wherever it may be, and they don't need to be compromised by something like COVID-19. It's been absolutely crazy what coronavirus has put on the world, but even going further into, when you dive into sports, there's a lot of futures on the line, in college football right now. And I was also mentioning earlier, talking about the high valued prospects in college football. What's going to happen with them? If people opt out, I think they need to be guaranteed eligibility for next season. No one should have anything stripped from them this year, considering how everything's playing out. I mean, when would you realistically think that we would say, okay, we're going to have spring college football? Nobody probably thought of that. I know I didn't think of that. I figured, okay, they're either just going to cancel it and we're just going to come back next year. But to move it to the spring, I mean, that's huge. You're talking about starting right after the Super Bowl, which is one of the most viewed events in the world. Not directly after, but you're talking about starting a month or so after the Super Bowl. So it's going to be interesting to see how it plays out with the revenue and everything, what is really just going to be the ripple effect, the ripple effect, like I was mentioning. But another thing I look into also is you got to look at how the locality of a lot of areas are going to be affected, because let's take, me being from Georgia, let's take Athens, for example, huge college town, huge party town, obviously home to the Bulldogs. Those bars, those restaurants, all those businesses get such an influx, such an uprise in their revenue and their profits when college football is going on. So you got to think, if there's no college football, we've already seen COVID put businesses out in general, but now when you have businesses that ride on a college football season, how's that going to impact the economy to therefore being able to support the movement of that college football team. I know there's funds and things that go from the city into the program to make it better, ticket sales, food sales, whatever it may be. But I don't think a lot of people are thinking about the locality that could be affected with college football being canceled as well. But realistically, I do think that the SEC, the ACC, and the Big 12 should follow suit. As much as it breaks my heart, I don't think sports should have happened this year. Like I've been saying really all week, as much as I love putting out content, love eating, breathing, and sleeping sports, man, there's just so much to be put at risk here. And I want to ask you, Brian, do you feel like they should follow suit?
Yes, I do. I think they should follow suit. I think it's in the best interest of the players. I mean, that being said, you bring up such a good point where, like, it affects so many more people than just the players, just the coaches, like, and even just university representatives. Like, these colleges, a lot of them, these universities are kind of cities them and have their own economic markets.
Exactly.
And so many jobs could likely be lost that are university jobs from not bringing in that same amount of revenue, but also, like you mentioned, bars, restaurants, those sorts of things.
Mm-hmm.
In a small towns, like, again, App State, like Boone's a really small town that's very dependent on not only the college as a whole, but college football. So the rippling effect goes so much further than just what's on the surface. But I do think that they should follow suit with the Pac-12, with the Big Ten, with the current setup that college football has. If the setup was different, if the football players were more officially employees, then I think we're talking about a different scenario. But the current situation and the liability that the universities are taking, I think they don't really have much of a choice, but I guess they do have that choice, but to move it until the spring.
Yeah, good point you made there, man. Very good point. And we were just speaking, guys, of very high-valued prospects, of course, for college football. Like I said, if you stay tuned for the whole episode, ladies and gentlemen, we're going to get into not a major QB1 debate here, but I haven't talked about the two of these quarterbacks, comparing them coming up for the 2021 NFL Draft. Yes, of course, it is Justin Fields and it is Trevor Lawrence. We're going to break the two of these guys down, really see who we would take, who would be our guy to start a franchise with. I want to start with the guest first, of course, though, with you, Brian. Who would you take, Justin Fields or Trevor Lawrence? No explanation yet. I just want to know who you would take, Fields or Lawrence.
Lawrence is who I'm going with. Yeah.
All right. I got you. See, I'm a Justin Fields guy, but let's get into some numbers a little bit here. I'll go back and forth with you a little bit. We'll challenge each other on what we've both seen in their game. So, of course, we got to start with the numbers. Everybody starts with the numbers. That's how you really get a baseline on the talent that you're evaluating, of course. So, Justin Fields, in the 1 year he started for Ohio State, 3,300 yards, just about 41 touchdowns, only one pick in the regular season, 3 picks on the year, throwing 2 in that game against Clemson. And he ran for 484 yards on the season and hit double digits in rushing touchdowns with 10. Then you look at Trevor Lawrence, who isn't necessarily a dual threat quarterback, throwing for 3,700 yards, 36 touchdowns, and 8 interceptions. So a little more turnover prone, but not necessarily a bad season from the man himself. It was only his sophomore year. Winning the national championship in his freshman year was a huge, huge accomplishment of his. Not many people can do that if you think about it. So you look, they're evenly matched when you look at the numbers, but like I mentioned with Trevor Lawrence not being a dual threat quarterback, he actually ran for more yards than Justin Fields did. I want to say by about 100, nothing crazy. Still had 9 rushing touchdowns as well, but people don't really think of Trevor Lawrence as a dual threat quarterback, more of a poised pocket guy. I'm considering him a dual threat quarterback, and I want to ask you, Brian, do you think Trevor Lawrence has the capability to turn into a Josh Allen, maybe a better runner than Josh Allen?
I'm not quite sure about a better runner than Josh Allen, but I definitely think, like, these guys are the prototypical future NFL quarterback, which really now means we've been saying future for forever. It's the present, right?
Yeah.
Like, it's happening right now.
Right.
He would be considered probably like a pocket quarterback, but obviously has far more mobility than what a pocket quarterback would have had 20 years ago.
Very Aaron Rodgers-esque when I watch him play.
Yeah, and I will say the comparison I do like to Josh Allen in the sense that they're both really tall guys. They've got the arm strength and straight line speed. Like, I don't think he's as good of a runner as Justin Fields, But in terms of straight line speed, like he's fast, and they're probably a little bit closer speed wise than I think people might understand.
Right.
So to me, Trevor Lawrence is the whole package, but definitely they're both so young. And with
Right.
Justin Fields just seeing 1 year, that obviously can completely change as these guys quickly progress in just the next 1 or 2 years.
I agree with you. And you also look at their head-to-head matchup in the playoffs when you had Ohio State facing off against Clemson in the college football playoff series. Neither one had a stellar game, but Lawrence had that better outing slightly, not being a dual threat quarterback, but he did run for 107 yards and he scored 1 touchdown, passing for about 260 on 50% passing and 2 touchdowns. Now, Justin Fields threw the football almost 50 times in that game for 320 yards, had 1 touchdown, the 2 picks, like I mentioned, and only 13 yards on 14 carries. So obviously Trevor Lawrence had the better game, but like I said, neither one of them played a stellar game. It was still a close game towards the end there. And you even got to look, Ohio State was coming down the field to win that game, and it was with the help of Justin Fields. His wide receiver, I don't know if anybody saw that game. I don't know if you did, Brian, but at the end of that game, his receiver cut left and Fields threw right. So they just weren't on the same page. But if that receiver cuts right, that's a wide open touchdown pass for Ohio State. And I'm not going to say they would have won the game there because obviously it wasn't over yet. I would think there was about 30 to 40 seconds left on the clock. I know less than a minute left in that game. But Ohio State was coming down the field to win that game. So you saw Justin Fields was able to display that improv and that natural just drive and desire to come down the field and win a game, to produce a game-winning drive. So I loved the head-to-head matchup between the two quarterbacks that we would be able to see. I like Justin Fields. Brian is over him mentioning that he loves Trevor Lawrence, but the reason I take Fields is because he's a more dynamic quarterback, and I feel like he can take over a game with his athleticism. The way he can improvise really when a play goes busted, in my opinion, is what makes him really stand out against Trevor Lawrence. And I'm not saying Trevor Lawrence isn't a good improv guy. I've seen him be able to roll out of the pocket and make the throw on the run, make the throw across his body as he's falling, and being able to take off, like you mentioned, with the straight line speed. And the NFL was without question moving towards a dual threat quarterback league. We can see with the likes of Kyler Murray getting drafted, Russell Wilson paving the way for the quarterbacks like Kyler Murray, and of course Lamar Jackson, who is the premier dual threat quarterback in the NFL right now. And I think that's what has put Fields, we all know that is what put Justin Fields on the map originally, was him being number 1 in that ESPN ranking and being the number 1 dual threat quarterback prospect also. He's got the arm talent to make any throw a quick and accurate throw into the tight windows. And a great stat here actually from Pro Football Focus showed that his average target was about 13 yards downfield, which was the highest of any returning Power 5 quarterback for this season. So that shows you he isn't afraid to throw the football, and he's smooth and careful with his game, not turning the football over at all. But now I want to get a little bit of insight from you, Brian. How do you feel about Justin Lawrence being Justin Lawrence? Wow, there we go. Mix of the two. How do you feel about Trevor Lawrence being the a lot of people saying he's the no doubt number 1 overall pick? What in Trevor Lawrence's game makes him your guy for your pick?
For me, Trevor Lawrence is the guy because he has shown that mobility. He rushed for over 500 yards, which is pretty amazing. And to me, it comes down to what the Clemson offense asks him to do. I think they asked him to do more than what Justin Fields was asked to do. And I understand that might be a little bit unfair to Justin Fields because it was his first year with Ohio State versus Trevor Lawrence's second year. So naturally, you're going to ask a second-year quarterback in the same system to do a little bit more. I get that. But I just think overall, when I look at their ceilings, I think Trevor Lawrence has more arm talent. The one pushback I will have, he's not been great on the deep ball. He's shown that he will underthrow that consistently, which is a bit of an issue. So I will concede that, but I think just in overall talent, Trevor Lawrence doesn't have a hole in his game.
Right.
I think he's the full package. He's got the size. He's got the mobility. He's got the accuracy, arm strength. You mentioned he's great throwing on the run either way, which is really important. A lot of quarterbacks struggle rolling out opposite of their throwing shoulder, and I think he's shown the ability to be successful in that manner. So Trevor Lawrence, again, as a prospect, I think is the guy for me moving forward and going into the NFL.
I feel you, man. I feel you. And see, the one thing I'm going to love about these two guys is you got Trevor Lawrence coming into his probably last year in the NFL the last year in college football before he gets drafted. And the same with Justin Fields. And with the outlier being, like you just said, with Joe Burrow, neither one of them have had, that senior season for Burrow is what was able to put him on the map and give him that push to where he's possibly going to have his stardom in the NFL. But we haven't seen a huge breakout season from either prospect yet. So that's what I think this year is going to be the prove it year. This year, I feel like no matter where the drafting lands, because I feel like there can be a little skepticism in the draft. You look at the year Johnny Manziel fell down to the bottom of the first round. Many people had him going number one. So you never know if, it could not even be Justin Fields or Trevor Lawrence for the number one overall pick. A lot of people are talking about, I want to say it's Powell or Sewell, the offensive lineman out of Oregon. They're saying he's going to be the possible number one pick. So we haven't seen a breakout season from either person yet. But the big thing that makes me want to really hold Justin Fields up there to that level that Trevor Lawrence has been on is the fact that he almost went to the national championship game in his first year. He's just one throw away potentially from beating Clemson in that game. Like I said, the receiver cuts to the left and he throws right. So it looks like a god-awful throw, but you can see back in the replay, it was a huge misunderstanding. And Justin Fields was really priming that Ohio State team to go to the national championship and play against an LSU team that they probably would have got blown out of the water by, because we saw what LSU did to practically everybody in the season and how they handled Clemson up front and how they handled, Jalen Hurts in Oklahoma up front. So there's no question about that. But in my opinion, Fields is what the NFL is looking for right now, and he immediately passes the eye test. If you look at it, Fields has less talent around him and was able to do what Trevor Lawrence was able to do. You have the receivers that Trevor Lawrence has. I mean, Trevor Lawrence had 2 to 3. Okay, so Trevor Lawrence had 2 great wide receivers, but then he also had a third wide receiver who was still good. So it's kind of like looking at the Dallas Cowboys for this upcoming year. The possibility of having 3,000-yard receivers. Trevor Lawrence was able to have 3 weapons immediately, to throw to with that Clemson offense. And Justin Fields, of course, did have J.K. Dobbins, who has gone to the Ravens now, so that's going to impact him as well. But I feel like Justin Fields clearly not having as much talent surrounding him as Trevor Lawrence did. Definitely, I think with the coaching matchup, with Ryan Day, and then obviously with Dabo Swinney for Clemson, that's kind of a matchup there and everything. I've got a weakness for dual threat quarterbacks. Looking back, I remember when I originally watched Michael Vick. I loved the way Michael Vick played. You had the Donovan McNabbs back then. Even Dante Culpepper a slight bit, being able to be a mobile quarterback. And then now you've got Lamar Jackson, Kyler Murray, Russell Wilson, Josh Allen, Deshaun Watson. I mean, all these guys that are going to be top 10, top 5 quarterbacks before you know it are in the dual threat in the mobile quarterback game. At the end of everything, I can say that Trevor Lawrence has slightly more NFL traits than Justin Fields does, but I think the way that Fields can take over a game with his being as dynamic as he is, the athleticism, and then the way he can extend plays with his improv ability is what will put him above Lawrence to be the number one pick and to be the number one overall quarterback prospect for the next year. How do you feel about that, Brian?
There's definitely a chance. I mean, honestly, I think for either guy that you're picking right. Somebody that's a great prospect. They can do it all, just like you explained. Mm-hmm. One guy that I absolutely have to mention before we end this thing, though, is Trey Lance. Out of North Dakota State University.
Yes, sir.
28 interceptions, 0 picks, or 28 touchdowns, 0 interceptions, dynamic. Really reminds me a lot of Justin Fields. And nice. I know he's playing on a different level. So, I get the competition isn't the same, but that didn't stop Carson Wentz out of North Dakota State.
I know that's
being
right.
the number 2 pick. Yep. And I really think that he is going to be in the conversation.
Yeah.
I think there's 3 guys, and I won't be shocked if they went in any order. I think they'll all be in the top 5, and I won't be shocked. You could tell me any 3 of those guys being the number 1 pick won't shock me. They all can do it all. They're all have shown great decision-making, great arm talent, and great mobility. So I think the bottom-dwelling teams in the NFL are going to be really excited to have a top draft pick, and they're probably really wanting them to have a college football season, get as much extra tape as possible and not have to
100%.
draft these guys off of either 1 or 2 years. But either way, I think that's 3 great quarterback prospects right there.
I agree with you, man. And I want to go and be able to watch more tape on that third quarterback you were talking about. And I also agree in the sense that you could even argue it could be, of course, you won't have 3 straight quarterbacks going in the first round, but if you did say it was 1, 2, 3, Fields, Lawrence, and then the third quarterback that you just mentioned, or, however you wanted to flip that around, I agree with you with the quarterback talent, of the prospects that are coming up in this year. It's going to fare out for a great college football season. Unfortunately, we won't be able to see, Justin Fields play this year, which is, we'll be able to see him play in the spring, but, it's going to be different because with everything getting thrown towards the spring, is Justin Fields going to see defenses that he's going to need to see to become a better player? Reading defenses as a quarterback is a very, very vital trait. You look at the likes of Drew Brees, Russell Wilson, Tom Brady, the people that are really able to dissect a defense, Peyton Manning, even for a better example, able to dissect a defense at the line. What types of teams, rather, is he going to face? What kind of defenses could he be coming across? Is he going to have the chance to improve this coming season, or is it going to be a walk in the park? What kind of tape does that present for the prospect of Justin Fields? That is going to wrap up today's episode of the What Off Season Sports Podcast, everybody. I appreciate everybody so much for tuning in for this loaded episode today featuring Brian Bolster of Bolstered Up Sports again. Don't forget to go subscribe to his podcast. I'm going to throw all of his information down here for you. Hit him up on Instagram. Go subscribe to his podcast. Like, comment, give him a review. Go get some engagements on his social media page, of course, guys. And like I was mentioning with the link tree in our social media bio, you can check us out. Everything What Off Season Sports content is going to be in those bios for you. Of course, subscribe on YouTube, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, wherever you get your podcasts at. Brian, thank you so much for coming on the show today, man. We'll have to do it again sometime. This is What Off Season signing out, everybody.